One night while I was sleeping, I woke up in a panic to my brother Alex screaming. I ran into his room and found him lying in his bed, thrashing back and forth. He shouted,
"Don't go, Noah! Don't go! You should never approach that man. Never. Never."
I shook him forcefully, and he finally woke up. I asked him what was wrong, and with tears streaming down his face, he told me why he was having nightmares. About a month ago, Alex was playing at his friend Noah's house when he heard a strange noise outside. They looked outside and saw a man standing in the front yard, so Noah went outside to talk to him. But the face of the man standing in the yard was purple, and when Alex saw his face, he felt his stomach turn. Alex had a gut feeling that something was ominous, and he yelled at Noah, telling him not to go. But Noah had already approached the man. After Noah had looked at the man's face for a few seconds, he froze and then fell and hit the ground like a tree. Alex was shocked and shouted,
"What happened?"
Noah collapsed on the ground, convulsing and gasping for air. The purple-faced man laughed wildly, put his face right up to Noah's, and taunted him. As Alex watched the man from behind the window, he felt an extremely bizarre emotion and fear welling up in his chest. He called out to Noah, but he continued to lie on the ground, clearly in pain. He realized nothing was working and called 911. However, by the time the police and rescue teams arrived, Noah had already stopped breathing, and the purple-faced man had vanished. Later, doctors performed an autopsy on Noah's body, and they found that the cause of death was determined to be a heart attack. However, his body was uninjured, without any cuts or bruises, and no harmful substances were found in his body. The doctor said something had damaged Noah's heart, but the cause of damage was unknown. The doctor was perplexed, saying it was his first time seeing a case like this. Alex was speechless. He knew he saw Noah rolling around in pain before he died, but Noah was seemingly healthy, and he was playing normally with Alex until just seconds before he met the purple-faced man. When the purple-faced man looked down at Noah's face, Noah suddenly collapsed. Alex told this to the police, but they didn't listen to him. From that day on, Alex suffered from tremendous fear and guilt. But sometime later, he heard even more shocking news. Within 3 days of the original incident, 3 more people had suffered heart attacks in our neighborhood. Among them, 2 died and 1 survived. Shockingly, they all were reportedly seen near a purple-faced man before collapsing. One of the men who survived said this,
"The moment I saw that man's face, I felt my heart tightening like crazy. I don't know why. That man's eyes were full of hate, cold as ice, and that smile that smelled of blood. As soon as I saw that face, I couldn't breathe. My whole body felt weak, but I intuitively knew that I could survive if I got as far away from that man as possible. So I crawled away with all my might. But the man came after me and put his face right up to my nose and laughed. He told me to look at his face, and I squeezed my eyes shut. Not seeing his face made the pain a little better. But this time, his laughter. The moment he started laughing maniacally in my ear, my heart tightened again. I closed my eyes, covered my ears with my hands, and crawled like crazy. Then my neighbors found me and the man ran off. I think I came back from the dead. I really didn't know that just by looking at someone, you could die."
The police did not believe him. From that day on, the purple-faced man never appeared in our neighborhood again. Who was he, and why did people die? This incident remains a mystery to this day.
Hi, I am Mai. I am currently 19 years old. This story of mine was a little weird for me, and it still haunts me even now. It all started when I was 17 years old. In my house, we have 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for my parents. In this house, I always have a feeling that someone is watching me, and it has always made me feel uneasy. Because of this feeling, I usually felt uncomfortable sleeping alone and didn't like the dark, so every night I left the lights on. The first scary experience happened one night as I was sleeping. But in the middle of the night, my eyes opened. I couldn't breathe, and even though my eyes were open, I couldn't move a single part of my body. It was terrifying because I knew that I was experiencing sleep paralysis, but still couldn't do anything about it. After looking around, I realized that there was a tall, shadowy, faceless man standing over me. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I tried to shout, but it was like the shouting was only in my mind. Nothing was working. So I tried to pray 3 times and close my eyes. After maybe 1.5 minutes, I could move my body and I was able to catch my breath. But it was like I had just gone on a run. My heart was pounding. I didn't tell my parents about it because I thought maybe I was just tired that day or it was a bad dream. On the second night, I was sleeping again and my position was facing the door. My eyes opened and I could barely breathe again. But what was different was that this time, I felt something tightly binding my arms. I looked over and there were 3 pairs of arms that were trying to pull me under the bed. But it wasn't my body they were pulling. It was like they were pulling my soul out of my body. I tried to shout and call for my parents, but it was just my mind shouting. I tried to pray again, and after a few seconds, I thought it was over. But this time, I still couldn't breathe, and my body still couldn't move. I prayed and prayed and prayed until I felt my breath come back to normal. I was covered in sweat, and after that, I decided to stay awake for the rest of the night. I was too scared to sleep because I was worried it might happen again. I tried to distract myself by watching funny videos on YouTube while drinking coffee and eventually made it to 6 a.m. My mother usually wakes up around that time, so I left my room and joined her for breakfast. I wanted to tell her about it, but because of some chores I had to do and our conversation about other stuff, I forgot to mention it. On the third night, I went to sleep around 3 o'clock in the morning. I was watching some zombie movies late into the night because I'm a big fan of them, but the moment I feared happened again. I woke up and was having sleep paralysis. As usual, I couldn't control my body or shout to call my parents. But this time, I decided I would look at the tall, shadowy, faceless man. I could feel him looking at me. I felt it. Once I looked at him, I noticed that he was just there, sitting on my chair, completely still. I was scared, so I closed my eyes and prayed. But when I opened my eyes, he had moved to the corner of the room, slightly closer to me. So, I shut my eyes and prayed again and again until I felt like I could breathe and move my body again. When morning came, I told my mother about everything this time. She told me there was an open square-shaped hole in my room that there was supposed to be for air conditioning. She told me that it may be lingering spirits who come to mess with me in my dreams and suggested that the hole was possibly the entrance that the entities came in through. It happened to be around Palm Sunday, so we had a palapas, which is a woven palm leaf thought to carry blessings, and she put it over the hole to cover it up. Thankfully, after that, the nightmares and sleep paralysis finally stopped.
I'm a biochemistry professor at a college, and being a man of science, I believe in neither a god nor devil. This fact irked my parents and especially my grandmother a lot. They would always try to tell me that I don't know about the dark energies that exist in this world. I would shrug and laugh these statements off. My typical daily schedule is to wake up, do my morning routine, eat breakfast, then head to the college, hold lectures for my students, and leave late in the evening. One day, our college received an invite for a life sciences workshop at a top college in the state. It's a school that has the same prestige as an Ivy League, so I gladly accepted. The workshop was for 2 days with arrangement at the college dorms. My students were enthusiastic about it too. The plan was finalized, and on the day of the event, we safely arrived at the college for the workshop. There were many restaurants and shops on the way to the campus, suggesting an active nightlife. The day went by smoothly and was productive. I have dairy allergy, and at the dinner almost everything served contained dairy, so I didn't eat, although my students had a feast. Later, we all went to our respective rooms to sleep for the night. Around midnight, I felt terribly hungry as I hadn't eaten anything. Then I recalled the restaurants that I had seen on the way to the campus. There were 2 ways to reach the restaurants. One was the way roaming through the entire campus, and the latter was through the woods behind the rooms, which was the shorter way. I chose the shorter way even though I had heard rumors of the woods being haunted. I progressed along the path with my phone flashlight as it was pitch black out. After traveling a fair bit, I started getting an eerie feeling, like somebody was watching me. Then, in the distance, I noticed a silhouette. I assumed it was a college kid and tried to mind my own business. I walked briskly by the person and towards the area with the restaurants and finally arrived and ordered some roast chicken. I had a brief chat with the owner of the restaurant and happened to mention the silhouette and the short route I took. His face froze and eyes widened as I said those words. He said,
"You're lucky it didn't hunt you down. It was a Wendigo. Numerous people have disappeared because of it."
I was too stunned to speak. The owner told me to never take that route again. I obliged and ran as fast as I could through the campus to my room. Until today, I haven't mentioned this incident to anyone else, and I've become very religious since then, which surprised my family. I feel safe now, but my blood still runs cold when I think about what could have happened that night if that thing had come after me.
I don't really like being in the spotlight, but you can call me Suri. I was only 13 years old when this happened. When I was 12 years old, my grandma passed away. She was a kind and strong woman, but her cancer was stronger. It was sad to know that she was gone, but she was in a better place. She passed away in her bedroom while in her sleep. Although she was dead, I always had a sense that she was always there and watching me whenever I come in her bedroom, but not in the way I thought. A while after I turned 13, one day in particular, I needed a place to study for school. Her room was clean and extremely quiet, so I thought her room was the best place I could go. I took my stuff and went to her room. I sat down on her bed and began doing my studies. Then I was disturbed by some whispers. At the time, I thought it was my mom calling out to me from outside because it was so faint. I went outside and found my mom in the garden. "Yes, Mom? You called me?" I replied. She watched me in a weird way and then said, "What? No, Suri, I didn't call you." That was awfully weird, I thought to myself. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, so I left and went back to the room to study. I began hearing the whispers again, but I couldn't understand what the whispers were saying. I got scared. A cold chill ran down my spine, and I got up and began to run out of the house. I once looked behind me to see a shadow of a dress, which looked like it belonged to my grandma. The shadow followed me as I screamed and continued running even faster. My mother heard me and came to see what was happening. She came and tears rolled down my face as I explained everything to her. She was unsure of what to think, but she walked back to the room with me and sat down on the bed. She then told me, "Maybe Grandma was trying to communicate with you." But I didn't know if it was Grandma or some other demon. She moved me into a different room to study, but I was unable to think at the time. It's been a few years since this happened, but was that my grandma? Or was it some demon?
My name is Alex. I'm from the Philippines. I'm a 29-year-old guy and currently a medical doctor, but I was around 19 years old when this happened. During college, I had a habit of going to sleep very early once I got home from the university. I would go to sleep around 7 or 8 p.m. and then wake up around 1 a.m. to study or work on any of my assignments. I would stay up until around 4 a.m. and then go back to sleep as long as my tasks were done. It's also worth noting that I used to be a chain smoker. It bothered me whenever my siblings or my parents would call out my smoking, so it made sense to me to wake up whenever everyone in the house was still asleep. That way I could focus more on my tasks and smoke cigarettes as much as I wanted. Another thing I have to mention is that our house is inside a subdivision. We have some 24/7 convenience stores within walking distance, so if I ever had cravings, it was easy to access. Our house is pretty huge and has a gate. One night, I had to wake up around 1 a.m. again because my exams were coming up. Final requirements for the semester were also piling up, so I decided to stay up the entire night, focusing on all my tasks. That night, however, my little sister, who was also in college, told me to turn off all the lights outside our house and that I make sure that all the doors and the gates are closed. I wondered why, so I asked,
"What for?"
She said,
"There's a ghost of a woman dressed in a wedding gown. She carries a lantern and walks around our village at night. The reason why we have to turn off all the lights outside our house is so that she won't be attracted to it. I mean, why else would she be carrying a lantern? If she finds a house with the lights turned on, it is said that she gets curious. She drops her lantern and enters the house, especially if the house's gates are kept unlocked. Then she supposedly lives with the family."
I thought she was joking. She knows that I always wake up around 1 a.m. to study or focus on my tasks. She also knows that I smoke heavily and that I stink up the house with secondhand smoke whenever I do so.
"Yeah, right, a ghost. We've already grown up, sis. Don't you think it's time to outgrow these ghost stories already? Besides, you're just trying to get me to sleep all night so that I won't smoke and stink up the house."
With a serious expression on her face, she said,
"I'm not joking. If you don't want to believe me, fine. Just please turn off the lights outside and keep our doors and the gate closed."
After that, she left me alone, went up to her room, and proceeded to go to sleep. I dismissed her explanation as just a hoax. However, that same night, I happened to run out of cigarettes. I decided to leave the house for a bit and walk to the nearby convenience store, which was 5 minutes away by foot. As I walked there, it was so quiet. It was already 3 a.m. Our neighbors' houses kept their lights off, so it was pretty dark too. The only light sources I had were the street lights and the moon. At some point on the walk there, it suddenly got really cold. There was no wind or breeze, but it's the kind of chill you feel when a freezer gets opened. It was very strange because I live in a tropical country where it's always humid and warm. Again, I dismissed it because I thought like a scientist, reasoning out that it was already 3 a.m. and it's usually cold around that time. I got to the convenience store, bought my pack of cigarettes, and proceeded to walk back to our house. This time, however, the cold feeling was now accompanied by that feeling that someone was looking or staring at me. It felt like someone was watching and following me. I looked around and behind me, but no one was in sight. I started to get scared, but I reasoned my way out of it and started to think again like a scientist. I thought to myself that maybe it's just that stupid, scary story my sister told. As I thought like that, I started to walk faster, almost like power walking back to my house. But as I got nearer, I saw something from afar. A few houses away, I saw a silhouette or a shadow of a woman approaching me. I froze. My heart started pounding. Hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Literal goosebumps. When my eyes started to adjust to what I was seeing, it became clearer. Then I heard her. She spoke, but it sounded like a whisper. Speaking in our native language, she asked,
"Where is my husband?"
She repeated this over and over. Each time it got louder and louder, like she was almost screaming at the top of her lungs. I tried my best not to pay attention and focus on praying instead. Suddenly, it became quiet again. At that moment, I didn't know whether I should keep my eyes closed or open them again. I was so scared to see whether she was still in front of me. I took a chance and opened my eyes again. She disappeared. The cold feeling was gone. I immediately ran to my house, turned off all the lights, and locked the gates and all the doors. I decided to spend the rest of my night in my room and try to get some sleep instead of studying or finishing my tasks. After coming home from the university the next day, I tried to ask around about that ghost in our village. Our village security guards told me that she was a woman from the Japanese era in our country during World War II. She was a medical doctor that I shouldn't smoke, but the real reason is that I never wanted to see that ghost again. This story that I'm about to tell you is one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. It was in early 2020. The day was January 13th. My whole family was getting ready for bed around 10:30 p.m. To give some background about my family and house, I live with my 2 older sisters, 1 younger brother, and my mom and dad. Our house is pretty weird because every room sort of has a different temperature and feeling. My mom and dad's bedroom is warm and cozy. My oldest sister's room is very dry. My second older sister's room is cold and wet. My brother's is warm and humid, but my room is always a spine-chilling cold that just pierces your bones. Even when it's warm outside and my room gets a little warmer, what I mean by pierces your bones is that when you're in my room, you feel uneasy to your core. So anyways, back to the story. So it's January 13th and it's getting late. My mom always says goodnight to everyone before they sleep, and I always say goodnight back. So everyone heads into their rooms and shuts off the lights, except for my younger brother and I. We usually stay up talking for a long time before going to sleep around midnight. After we're done talking, he'll go to his room. But today he said he didn't really feel well and he wanted to go to bed earlier, around 11. So as a responsible older brother, I sent him off to his room, thinking that I'll just go to sleep early today and get some good sweet rest. Boy, was I wrong. After an hour or so, around midnight, I still hadn't fallen asleep. My brother comes to my door asking if I can help him with his dog. He told me that his dog pooped on the floor and he needed help. So I get up and open the door, but to my surprise, my brother isn't there. It was just the empty, dark hallway. But now with that spine-chilling cold feeling that is usually only in my room. But I figured maybe he had just run back to his room, so I walked down the hallway to check on him. I open his door and I see him just sleeping peacefully. And what's odd is, his dog is also just sleeping peacefully. There was no poop and nothing seemed wrong with anything. Well, I just brushed it off as a prank he was playing on me. But boy, was I wrong again. After that, I went to get some water from the kitchen and saw that my mom and dad were still up. So I felt better and just went back to bed. Around 2 in the morning, I wake up from some crazy noises outside and I look out my window and I see our neighbor's dog barking like crazy towards our house. I found it odd because that dog is usually so quiet and tame. You wouldn't even know they had a dog. I got closer to the window to check if I could see what the dog was barking at, but I didn't see anything. I just laid back down, trying my best to think nothing of it. As I shut my eyes, I started feeling this unease creep over my mind and body, and I felt the spine-chilling air flowing around my room. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very off. I sat up to start looking around my room to find out where the wind was coming from when all of a sudden there's a knock on my door. Not at the front door, but my room's door. I didn't think that anyone had come out of their rooms or walked down the hallway because I hadn't heard any footsteps or sounds before the knock. Right before I get a chance to respond to the knocks, I hear,
"Good night, George."
It's my mom, but for some reason I started feeling nauseated and my
Head started aching. Then she said again.
"Good night, George."
As genuine as it seemed, something felt off about the whole situation, and I felt like I shouldn't say anything back to her. I don't know why. And again.
"Good night, George."
At this point, she kept saying
it over and over every few seconds. Then I get out of bed and turn on the lights. My heart was racing. As I got closer to the door, my heart was pounding louder and faster. She finally stopped saying goodnight, so I stepped back and thought that it was over. I calmed down a little, but I was wrong this time too. I don't know why, but I just couldn't believe that this thing was a ghost or something unexplainable. I just didn't believe in that kind of thing. That's why I was the only one brave enough to sleep in that room, even with the disturbing feeling of someone watching me all night. Then a few seconds later, I hear another knock. This time it's my brother.
"Good night, George."
At this point, I'm just shocked and confused about what's going on with them. Then, after one final knock, started chanting,
"Good night, George."
in unison, over and over like a broken record. Both my mom and my brother, both just taunting me from behind that door. Two of the people that I trust the most. After a few seconds of them saying "Good night, George" non-stop, I just couldn't take it anymore. I screamed, "Please stop it!" while holding my head and closing my eyes. I closed my eyes hard, wishing that this was all just a dream. And surprisingly, I opened my eyes and yes, it was a dream. It's morning, the birds are singing, the sun is shining. Oh, and I smell bacon. I felt relieved that all of that wasn't my family messing with me. And me being me, I just brushed the dream off as my stupid imagination. But after that day, I kept having this dream night after night. The dreams didn't stop no matter what I did. I tried meditation, reading the Bible before sleeping, holding a cross in my hand, and I even kept the light on and my brother's dog with me, thinking that he could keep them away from me. Ha! Boy, was I really wrong. So after all those nightmares, I just asked my parents if I could move my bed into my brother's room, and they said okay. And to this day, I still sleep in my brother's bedroom. Even now, I'm not really scared of ghosts, but I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I did. I never told my family, but they feel creeped out enough in that room that no one uses it, and it's just a storage room. I wonder what would have happened to me if I stayed in that room. I have a feeling I might have lost my mind. And if you think that was the end of my paranormal experiences, it wasn't. I thought that too at first, but boy, was I wrong.